The doorbell rang, a simple ding-dong, but at that moment, my heart felt like it dropped straight down. I was standing in the kitchen, my hands still covered in dish soap. The small apartment, quiet on a weekend evening, suddenly felt suffocating. The doorbell rang again. I quickly wiped my hands on the towel hanging by the stove and walked to the door. And when the door slowly opened, I froze. My father was standing there. He was wearing an old light blue shirt, slightly faded from being washed too many times. The same familiar dark trousers. In his hand was a bag of fruit, probably bought along the way. He looked at me. His expression was calm, but that calmness made my spine go cold. My heart tightened. A wave of panic rose inside me, so fast that I couldn't prepare any reaction at all. Because my father shouldn't be here. Not now. Not in this place. I am 24 years old. I graduated from university a little over a year ago. After graduation, I got a job at a small media company in the city. The job isn't terrible, but the salary is just enough for me to get by. Not comfortable, not generous, just enough to pay rent, food, transportation, and sometimes a weekend coffee for myself. My boyfriend is 2 years older than me. He works as a graphic designer for a small studio. His job is similar to mine, not poor, but certainly not rich either. We are just two young people who have only recently stepped into the real world. No wealthy families backing us, no large savings, just two people trying to survive in an expensive city. We met in our final year of university. Back then, everything was simple. Dinner together, movies together, sitting at a cheap cafe near campus. And gradually, I can't even remember when love arrived. I only know that one day, having him beside me simply felt natural. After graduation, we each started our own jobs. But this city is not easy to live in. Rent keeps going up, living costs keep rising. And one day, he said to me, maybe we should move in together. I stayed silent for quite a while, not because I had never thought about it. Actually, I had thought about it for a long time. Living together would help us save money. We could split the rent, split the electricity and water bills, share the small burdens of everyday life. But more than that, we believed we had loved each other long enough, understood each other well enough, and were mature enough to live under the same roof. So we decided to move in together. The apartment we rented is in a small alley. Not a beautiful apartment, not a luxury building, just a small room with a loft. Small, but enough for two people. In the morning, sunlight shines through a tiny window. At night, the yellow light makes the room feel warmer. We bought an old wooden table, a small sofa, a portable electric stove. Everything is simple. Our life is simple too. Rent split in half, utilities split in half. Whoever gets home earlier cooks, the other washes the dishes. On weekends, sometimes we go to the supermarket together. Sometimes we just lie there watching movies in our little room. Many times I look at that scene and think, maybe this is what a family feels like. A small family, not official, but warm enough, peaceful enough. At least, that's what I used to think. But in this whole story, there is one thing I have always tried to avoid thinking about. One thing that makes me feel guilty every time it crosses my mind. My father knows nothing about this. Back in my hometown, my father is a very principled man. He's not someone who talks much, but when he does speak, his words are always clear. I still remember something from my high school days. Back then, I had a boyfriend, not a serious relationship, just a teenage crush. One afternoon, he walked me home. He only stopped his bike at the gate. We hadn't even said anything else when my father walked out. He didn't say anything at that moment. He just looked at us. His eyes were cold. That night, he told me a sentence I still remember to this day. A girl must know how to protect herself. Don't let men look down on you. He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't angry, but it was enough for me to understand just how strict he was. So, I have never dared to imagine his reaction if he found out that I am living with my boyfriend. We are not married, not engaged. There are no commitments at all. We simply live together, like a married couple, but not actually married. So I chose the easiest solution. I didn't tell my father. Every time I called home, I would simply say, I'm sharing a place with a female friend. My father believed it. Or maybe he just didn't ask further. Everything continued like that. I thought this secret could last for a long time. Maybe until I truly got married. Maybe until everything became more proper. but there was something I didn't understand at the time. Secrets rarely last forever, and sometimes they are exposed at the moment you are least prepared, just like tonight. The sound of the doorbell still echoes in my mind. My father is standing at the door. The bag of fruit in his hand sways slightly. He looks inside the apartment, his expression calm. But I know one thing very clearly. If he steps into this apartment, if he sees everything here, the men's clothes on the chair, the pair of men's slippers by the door, the shaving cream in the bathroom, then everything I have hidden for the past year will collapse in a few seconds. I stand at the door, my whole body stiff. In my mind, there is only one thought. Maybe this secret is about to stop being a secret, and I had no idea. Something even worse was still waiting ahead. My father is a man of principle. My father is a very principled man. He isn't the kind who yells a lot, and he's not someone who likes to control every little thing his children do. But with him, there has always been a very clear line. The things he believes are right must never be crossed. And among all of his principles, there is one I have always known very well. We were just standing there talking for a few minutes. Nothing special, no holding hands, no hugging, nothing inappropriate. But right then, my father walked out of the house. He stood at the doorway, looking at us. He didn't say a word, but his gaze alone made both of us so uncomfortable that neither of us dared to say another word. The boy quickly said goodbye and sped off, and I walked into the house in silence. That night, my father called me into the living room. He didn't yell. He wasn't angry. He just said one sentence very slowly. A girl must know how to respect herself. Don't let men look down on you. At that time, I simply nodded, but deep inside, I was thinking, this is the modern world. Who still thinks like that anymore? I grew up in a different generation. A generation where dating is no longer as strict as it used to be. A generation where many people believe that before marriage, two people should live together to understand each other, to see whether they truly fit, to avoid rushing into a marriage that might later fall apart. And when I turned 24, I started to believe I had the right to choose my own life. I have a job. I earn my own money. I can take care of myself. I'm no longer that high school girl who had to be home before 9 p.m. I am an adult. At least, that's what I thought. Until one weekend evening, I had just finished work. I was sitting on a bus on my way home when my phone suddenly vibrated. The screen showed two words, "Dad calling." I answered. My father's voice on the other end was as calm as always. "What are you doing?" "I just got off work." He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said something that made my heart suddenly skip a beat. "Send me the address of your place." I froze. "What for, Dad?" "I'm near that area. Tomorrow I'll stop by to see how you're living." Just a simple sentence. But to me, it felt like a bomb exploding in my head. I went completely still. My hand holding the phone suddenly felt cold. At that moment, there was only one thought in my mind. This is bad. My father thinks I'm sharing a room with a female friend. He has no idea that I'm actually living with my boyfriend. He has no idea that the room he's about to walk into is where the two of us have been living like a married couple for almost a year. I mumbled a few vague replies and hung up. The entire bus ride home, I barely remember which streets we passed. My mind kept repeating one question. What should I do now? Tell the truth or keep lying? If I tell the truth, I can imagine my father's reaction. He might be very disappointed, very angry. He might even stop talking to me for a while. But if I keep lying, what will I do when he actually comes? I can't turn this room into a two girls sharing a place apartment overnight. I can't hide all the signs of my boyfriend's presence, his clothes, his belongings, the way we live. That night I could barely eat anything. My boyfriend noticed I was quiet and asked, "What's wrong?" I told him that my father wanted to visit. He paused. After a long moment, he said, "Maybe we should just tell him the truth." But telling the truth wasn't easy. Not because I was afraid of being scolded, but because I was afraid of the disappointment in my father's eyes. The same look he had that afternoon when I was in 11th grade. That night I lay in bed, but my mind kept spinning. Finally, I did something I had never done before. I went online. I entered a forum, and I wrote about my story. I said that I was living with my boyfriend, that my father didn't know, that he was about to come visit, and I asked everyone one question. Should I tell the truth or keep hiding it? I didn't expect my post to receive so many responses. Hundreds of comments appeared within just a few hours. But the more I read, the more confused I became. Some people criticized me harshly. A girl who lives with a man before marriage is basically already divorced once. If you break up later, who will marry you? Others were even more blunt. If you're brave enough to live like husband and wife, why are you afraid of your father finding out? Those comments made me uneasy. But there were also many people defending me. They said, living together isn't a crime. At least you'll know if he's willing to share housework. It's worse to get married first and then discover you're not compatible. Two completely different opinions. Every comment made me think a little more. Part of me began to wonder, was I really wrong? But another part of me thought, why is this always judged more harshly for women? If two people live like a married couple, why is it always the woman who is said to have lost her value? The more I read, the more confused I became. The more I thought, the less I knew what to do. And then, while I still hadn't made a decision, something unexpected happened. The next evening, I was in the kitchen. My hands were still covered in dish soap. My phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up. The caller's name appeared. Dad. I quickly wiped my hands. My heart suddenly started pounding. I answered, Dad? On the other end of the line, my father's voice was calm, as if he were talking about something completely ordinary. I'm downstairs. Come open the door in a minute. At that moment, my whole world seemed to stop, and I knew my secret was probably about to be exposed. That night, I was standing in the kitchen washing dishes. It was a very ordinary evening. Outside the window, the pale yellow streetlight spilled softly into our small apartment. The only sounds in the room were the running water and the gentle clinking of dishes. My boyfriend had just finished showering and was upstairs on the loft looking for a shirt to wear. Our small apartment carried the familiar feeling of an evening after work. Peaceful, normal. There was no sign that just a few minutes later, everything would turn into chaos. I had just placed the last bowl on the rack when the phone on the table suddenly vibrated. A short buzz, then another. I turned to look. The screen lit up. 2 words appeared clearly on the display. Dad. My heart skipped a beat. For some reason, a strange feeling suddenly rose in my chest. Like a bad premonition, I quickly wiped my hands on the kitchen towel and picked up the phone. Hello, Dad? The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds. Then I heard his familiar voice, calm, slow, as if he were talking about something completely normal. I'm downstairs. Come down and open the door in a minute. At that moment, it felt like someone had pressed pause on the entire world. All the sounds in the apartment suddenly felt distant. The sound of running water, the fan spinning, cars passing outside, everything seemed to fade away. Inside my head, only one sentence echoed again and again. I'm downstairs. I froze. My hand holding the phone began to tremble. The bottle of dish soap slipped from my hand. Clack. It fell into the sink. Soap bubbles splashed everywhere, but I could barely feel anything anymore. Because at that moment, a terrifying realization slammed straight into my mind. Dad was right below this building, right below the apartment where I was living with my boyfriend, right below the place I had hidden from him for almost a year. I had never told my dad I lived here, and I had certainly never told him I was living with a man. In every phone call home, I always said the same sentence. I'm sharing a place with a female friend. A small lie, but one that had lasted for a whole year. And now, that lie was about to collapse. My boyfriend came down from the loft. Still drying his hair, he asked, What's wrong? I turned to look at him. My face must have turned pale, because he immediately stopped. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. It took a few seconds before I could stammer out the words. My dad. He frowned. What about your dad? I swallowed hard. Then I said the sentence that even I couldn't quite believe. My dad is downstairs. The room instantly fell silent. My boyfriend stood still for a few seconds. Then he slowly turned his head and looked around the apartment. And when his eyes passed over the things in the room, I knew he had realized the same thing I had. This apartment did not look like the home of two girls. On the chair near the window was his dress shirt. On the floor by the door was a pair of black men's sandals. On the table, his leather wallet and motorbike keys. In the bathroom, a bottle of shaving cream. Every single thing there was impossible to explain, impossible to hide, impossible to make disappear in a few minutes. We looked at each other. Neither of us needed to say anything. We both understood one thing. It was already too late to hide anything. I walked to the window, looked down into the small alley below, and there, under the streetlight, I saw a familiar figure. My dad. He stood beside his old motorbike, one hand holding a bag of fruit, the other resting on the seat. His posture looked exactly the same as every time I saw him back home. Calm, unhurried. But to me at that moment, that image made my heart pound so hard I could barely breathe. I turned back to look at the apartment. Everything suddenly looked messy. Things that once felt completely normal now looked like clear evidence of a hidden secret, a secret about to be exposed. My boyfriend asked quietly, "What do we do now?" I couldn't answer. At that moment, dozens of thoughts ran through my head. Hide some of the stuff? No time. Tell him to hide? Ridiculous. Lie again? Impossible. Everything would be obvious. And then, a sound echoed. Ding dong, the doorbell. We both flinched. I looked at the door. The bell rang again. Slow, patient, not rushed. Exactly like my dad. My boyfriend swallowed nervously. And I felt my heart pounding so loudly it seemed like the whole room could hear it. I took a deep breath, then slowly walked toward the door. Every step felt as heavy as lead. My hand rested on the doorknob. Cold, very cold. I knew that the moment I opened this door, nothing would ever be the same again. 1 second, 2 seconds. I opened the door. The door slowly creaked open. And standing in front of me was my dad. He stood there, the same old shirt, the same bag of fruit in his hand. He looked at me, his eyes calm. Then he stepped into the apartment. His gaze slowly swept across the room. Very slowly. He didn't say anything, didn't ask anything, but that silence sent a chill down my spine. And then, he turned to look at my boyfriend and spoke his first sentence, a sentence that made my heart drop straight to the floor. "Hello, I'm this girl's father." My father walked into the apartment. The door closed quietly behind him. In that moment, I felt as if the air in the room suddenly became heavier. My father didn't say anything right away. He simply stood in the middle of the room. His eyes slowly scanned around. Very slowly, very carefully. Every small corner of the apartment seemed to fall under his gaze. The chair by the window, the small wooden table in the center, a pair of men's slippers beside the door, a shirt draped over the back of a chair. I stood next to him, feeling my heart pounding so hard it was almost difficult to breathe. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I knew one thing for sure. He already understood everything. My father took a few more steps inside. He placed the bag of fruit on the table. The sound of the plastic bag touching the tabletop was very small, but in that silence, it sounded incredibly loud. Then he turned to look at my boyfriend. His gaze wasn't angry. There was no sign of irritation, just a calm look, so calm that it made me feel even more uneasy. He said, "Hello." His voice was deep and slow. "I'm her father." My boyfriend straightened up. He lowered his head slightly. "Hello, sir." His voice trembled a little. I knew he was trying to stay calm, and I stood beside him. My hands clenched so tightly that my palms began to hurt. A few seconds passed in silence. Then my father said another sentence, a sentence that sent a chill down my spine. "I've heard about you for quite some time." I lifted my head and looked at him. Only one question echoed in my mind. Since when did he know? My father walked to the sofa and sat down. His movements were as calm as always, as if this were just a normal visit. He looked at both of us, then said, "There's someone upstairs who used to be my classmate." I froze. He continued, "She has seen the two of you many times. She thought I already knew. She even praised you too, saying you looked like a perfect couple living together peacefully." Each sentence he spoke felt like a small knife slicing through the silence in the room. My face grew hot. My ears rang. So, the secret I had tried to hide for an entire year had actually been seen by others long ago. I was the only one who believed I was hiding it well. I lowered my head, too ashamed to look into my father's eyes. At that moment, there was only one feeling in my mind. Shame. Not because I was living with my boyfriend, but because I had lied to my father for so long. After a while, my father asked. His voice was still calm. "How long were you planning to hide this from me?" The question wasn't loud, it wasn't harsh, but it weighed heavier than any scolding. I murmured quietly, I was afraid you'd be angry." The room fell silent again. My father looked at me. His eyes weren't as strict as I had imagined. They looked tired. He sighed, a very soft sigh, but it felt as heavy as the entire room. He said, "If you chose to live like this, why didn't you talk honestly with your family?" I couldn't answer. He continued, Why not get married properly first, then live together? I didn't know how to answer that either, because the truth was, I had never thought that far ahead. We simply lived together, to save money, for convenience with work, and because we thought if we loved each other, living together wasn't wrong. But standing in front of my father, all those reasons suddenly felt weak. My father was silent for a few seconds. Then he stood up. I thought he would say something more to me, but he didn't. Instead, he turned to my boyfriend. His eyes were now very serious. He walked closer to him. The distance between them was only a few steps. I could feel the tension in the room rising. My father looked straight into his eyes, then asked, his voice lower now, living together before marriage isn't the most important thing. He paused. The whole room was completely silent. Then he continued, what matters is whether you're willing to face this. The air felt thick. I turned to my boyfriend, waiting. Just one sentence, just one word would be enough. Just say yes. But my father wasn't finished. He added, slowly, word by word, or are you just living together because it's convenient? The sentence fell into the room like a heavy stone. My heart pounded, my ears burned, my throat felt dry. I looked at my boyfriend, waiting for his answer, but he stood there, silent. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence stretched so long that I began to feel like I couldn't breathe. My father kept looking at him, waiting, and suddenly, a strange fear crept into my chest, a fear I had never felt before. What if he doesn't answer? What if he never planned to marry me? What if the past year, I had been living in a relationship where the future only existed in my imagination? The room remained silent. No one said anything, but that silence felt like everything was slowly breaking apart, and I had no idea that the thing which would truly break me wasn't this conversation. It was what happened afterward. That night, I finally began to realize the truth about my relationship. After that question, the room fell silent, a very heavy silence. No one said anything. My boyfriend was still standing there. My father was too. Two men facing each other in a small room. One was my father. The other was the man I had chosen to live with for almost a year. I stood between them. But at that moment, I felt like I was completely outside the situation, because my father's question was not meant for me. It was meant for him. I looked at him, waiting. Just one sentence. All he needed to say was, I do. But he remained silent. The silence stretched so long that I started to feel cold. Finally, my father sighed. He didn't ask anything else. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't get angry. He simply turned and looked at me. The look in his eyes at that moment is something I will never forget. It wasn't the look of a man who was angry. It was the look of a father who was worried. He spoke very slowly. You're grown up now. I won't stop you. I lifted my head. I didn't expect him to say that. My father continued. His voice grew deeper. But don't let someone try living together with you. He paused for a moment, then said the final sentence. If anything, you should be the one trying to live. That sentence was soft, very soft, but it felt so heavy that something inside my chest seemed to drop. My father didn't say anything else. He looked around the room one more time, then picked up the bag of fruit he had brought. I quickly said, Dad, please stay. But he shook his head. I have something to do. I'll head back to the countryside. I knew that was just an excuse. Maybe he didn't want to stay. Maybe he didn't want to make things more awkward. Or maybe he had already said everything he needed to say, and that was enough. My father walked to the door. I stood there watching him. There were hundreds of things I wanted to say. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain. But in the end, I couldn't say anything. The door opened. My father stepped outside. Then it closed. Click. The sound of the door shutting echoed through the small room, and suddenly, everything became very quiet. No more voices, no more tension. Only the two of us remained. I stood in the middle of the room. My boyfriend stood near the window. Neither of us spoke. After a while, he sighed. Your dad, he's strict. He said it like it was just an ordinary comment, as if the conversation that had just happened wasn't something significant. I looked at him, waiting for him to say more, waiting for him to talk about my father's question. But he said nothing else. He simply walked into the bathroom, washed his face, then climbed up to the loft, like every other day, as if tonight had been completely normal. I stood there for a long time, Then I tidied up the room, put the fruit my father brought on the table, turned off some of the lights. Everything returned to normal, at least on the outside, but in my mind, everything had begun to change. That night, we went to bed. The room was dark. Only the street light from outside shone through the window. My boyfriend lay beside me. After a short while, he fell asleep, his breathing steady, peaceful, as if he had just lived through a very ordinary day. But me, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. My father's words kept repeating in my head. Living together as a trial or living for real doesn't matter. What matters is whether you intend to marry her. And his final sentence: don't let someone try living with you. You should be the one trying to live. I turned to look at the man lying next to me. The man I had lived with for almost a year. We had breakfast together, gone to work together, cooked together, watched movies together, slept in the same bed. All those things made me believe we were building a future together. But tonight, for the first time, I realized something. I had never asked him one very important question. Did he truly want to marry me? Or were we just living together because it was convenient? Because it saved money? Because we were lonely in this big city? Or simply because neither of us had found someone else yet? I looked at him for a long time. He was still asleep, peaceful, without a single worry. And somehow, that peace made me feel even more alone. Then I realized something that sent a chill through me. I live here, in this room, on this bed, but I don't know what place I hold in his life. Am I his girlfriend? Or just a roommate? Or worse, just a trial, a temporary trial, until he meets someone else? I used to think living together before marriage wasn't wrong. If two people truly loved each other, if both were kind, if both shared a future. But now, I'm no longer sure. If it was truly right, why did I feel guilty in front of my father? Why did his question scare me so much? I stared at the ceiling. Outside the window, the street lights were still on. The city was still noisy as usual. But in this small room, everything suddenly felt different. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had never dared to think about before. If one day, we break up, then this year of living together, for him, might just be a period of time. But for me, what would it be? And if you were me, what would you do? Stay and hope that one day he truly chooses you? Or leave before realizing you were only ever a trial in someone else's life?